Hello everyone and welcome to this creepypasta video. So in this one I found a creepypasta that's to do with body horror, zombies, undead and also Wild West zombies. So I thought, well, that's going to be very different to say the least. So I thought that this sounded like an interesting one to go for, and it's called You Can Only Bury the Dead So Deep. So let's get cracking. So Walker McCoy was the measure of how stubborn the dead can be. He was buried at 22 feet in some nowhere prairie just outside of Gay County on October 4th, 1867. 2 days later, a group of Indians found his severed arm, identifiable only by a trashy signet ring. That limb had been scrambling against the brush, squeezing the guts out the ass and mouth of a field mouse. We hadn't a clue where the rest of Walker had gotten to, but that crook's arm went back into the ground at 30 feet the very next day. That's why you should never ride idly. If you happen upon the double crosses, we do as good a job as we can given circumstances, but there's only so far down the shovel can go, and the dead are getting mighty restless lately. On a Sunday, the flattened tin cans pinned to the sidewalks flashed like a trout. Still, no amount of metal on the ground could make Magnum shine. It was a beat-up town pulled this way and that until its arms swung loose with their sockets. It was neither here nor there. Wasn't ours or theirs. A place secured only by promise. Wyatt sat outside the post office, whistling a broken tune and watching Nellie Rose brush her mare. My brother always had a song in him when that girl was around, like all other boys in town. Such a shame she'd never look his way. Just as well, where he'd been digging graves for so long he'd taken on the form of a tombstone. He was a pale, lumbering slab of a man that cast the darkest of shadows. Eyes back in your head, I said, slapping him on the shoulder with the roll of posters I picked up. Nellie Rose doesn't want a man so acquainted with the dead. Dutch, I was just. He cleared his throat and pushed a hand through his sleek silk hair. Admiring a horse, that's all. I grunted, then hitched up a seat next to him. Are those all the second timers? Wyatt said, nodding at the posters. He lit up a smoke, took a long drag, then blew out a big cloud into the sky. I frowned at him, sorry about that guys, in silence until he stubbed the bastard out and apologised. Yep, these are them. Looks like a lot. How many? 12. Wyatt looked at me. 12? Yep. He blew out a side, then melted smoke. Surprised we ain't had people demanding their money back. I grunted again. I swiped the cigarette from his hand, took a drag of my own, then passed it back. I guess that's why we round them back up. He nodded absently. His gaze fell back on the girl. Still no sign of Walker? Nope. If he was on Indian land, we'd know by now. Is that good news? I shrugged, stood up and squinted down the high street. I watched passers-by mill about in the dust clouds kicked up by the horse and carts, the murmuring of midday crowds and the rattle shoes on the tin-pressed sidewalks, the men slumped in chairs outside the saloon bar with empty bottles pinched in their hands. The smell of scorched earth and sweat, it was a scent that never quite left the Magnum resident. Even if they lay plenty of distance and time between them and the town, some folk called it a souvenir. Most called it a curse. Though with the way things were lately, I think too many people carelessly throw that word around. I mean, it was just a town, a nowhere place full of nowhere people, all stooped and wild-eyed beneath the unforgiving sun. Shit, I know Magnum wasn't much, but it was home, and I'd rather ride in hell than to see my town overrun by either Indians or the dead. Anyway, let's go, I said, helping Wyatt up to his feet. He brushed off some dirt on his trousers, pulled out his gun, inspected the chambers, then holstered it again. Where are we headed first? Same place as always, I said, where the holes are. We buried Hattie Sinclair last winter at 24 feet. The poor girl was 15 when she hit the dirt. Her back was bent out of shape after a fall from a horse. Mr. Sinclair needed extra conveniency to lay his daughter to rest. He wanted to hold out until the spring. The ground's a little hungrier then and doesn't tend to spit people back up. But everyone knows a body doesn't keep long under the magnum sun. At the time I thought we put enough mud down, but it turned out that Hattie had gotten a bit itchy a couple of weeks back and was now stalking cattle down by the Salt Fork. That's why Wyatt and I rolled out so close to the double crosses. We owed Hattie's dad an apology. We followed the Salt Fork most of the way, every now and then sweeping the valley for anything strange, but the land was still. All that moved was the Salt Fork, which trembled beneath the sun, its ragged clay bluffs burning red like a wound. The land was silent except a couple of crows that cawed mockingly from overhead. After a couple of hours we found what we were looking for. Blood everywhere, Wyatt said, bringing his horse to a trot and swiping the flies from his face. His shirt was already clinging wetly to his back. Our girl must be close, I said, nodding at the pried open ridge cage of a cow. Its inlets were now just a vicious red smear across the dirt, squinting against the sun. I could see the cow spine beyond the small thicket. I almost mistook it for a snake basking in the sand. A little further on, an indiscernible lump of meat that I assumed to be the creature's head. Then where the dust met the sky, an old barn house loomed. It appeared to be held up with the trees growing through it. I looked at Wyatt, who was circling the disemboweled cow. He cocked his head, then blew out a sharp whistle. I pulled my horse up alongside him to see what had caught his eye. As soon as I saw it, my hands went slack on the reins, and an oily fear turned about in my guts. Fuck. Curled up inside the carcass of that cow was a fresh body, a child, a small bundle of bones, draped in lumps of drooling meat and ragged strips of skin, Indian skin, and in that poor boy's contorted mouth was the other dismembered hand of our friend Mr. McCoy, right wrist deep to the teeth, fingers still scratching at the back of the kid's skull, Walker's crook brand still visible on the grey meat of his forearm. I wheeled my horse round, bagged him up and found somewhere to bury him. I'll get the girl. Then I set off at a gallop towards the barn, hoping that we hadn't completely fucked the whole town. Walker, that stubborn bastard, would willingly just stay dead. The barn was no longer what I call a building. If it weren't for the roof and the branches of a nearby tree, I doubt the walls would stand at all. Long ago, someone had once painted the wooden panels in red. Since then, seasons come and gone now, and paint had blistered into rosettes of sun-starched pink. Each peeped through the lattice of vines that wrapped their way around the barn's exterior. It was almost beautiful. 2 large doors were barricaded by a long plank of wood, though that doesn't matter as the large hole yawned open down the left flank of the structure, revealing a room crowded with shadows. I ducked my head to get a better look inside and noticed a crimson streak snaking along the floor. I checked my gun was loaded and used a bowl to tear away a dusty curtain of cobwebs, then entered the building. Death was on the air and sickly sweet. I scanned the room to see wooden crates and tall blades, rusted into bubbled orange. A wooden ladder rose up into the hayloft. I stepped towards it, then froze. A sound brief as a breath and quiet like a dying man's sigh. My eyes snapped to a dark corner of the barn. A shape had peeled away from the shadows. I cocked my gun and hunkered down behind a old wooden bowl. I watched as the small figure shambled about in the darkness. Hattie. She must have torn out her throat somehow, because each breath sounded like a peculiar sob. Peering around my cover and trying my gun on the movement in the gloom. Make it clean, Dutch. The girl's got to still look like her pulse of rent when you haul her back to town. Placing my finger on the trigger, I squinted down the barrel, steadied my breath, and waited for her to move into sight. The figure lurched forward, breaking away from the shadows, and just as I was about to blow that son of a bitch away, I lowered my gun. It wasn't Hattie. No, the shape that staggered out from the darkness was alive. Another Indian kid. A girl, maybe 8 or 9. Definitely older than the boy in the cow. She was all beat up and covered in blood. A ragged tear ran across her face from ear to chin. A thick slab of flesh had peeled away from her cheek and flapped limply with each uneasy step. She was struggling to suck in a full breath, her body shuddering with shock. I raised the gun again, fixed the girl in my sight, my finger loitering over the trigger. Quick and easy, it was the right thing to do. The girl's eyes lazily slid around in her head and then knocked onto me. They widened and she began to scream and sob. The girl dropped to her knees and threw up her hands, mumbling words I could not understand. But the gesture was clear. She was pleading to me, praying that I'd spare her life, that I'd save her. I holstered my gun and slowly approached the blubbering wreck. Hands on my hips, I blew out of sight and frowned at her. Who cared if she was Indian? The kid was too damn young to have so much fear in her. Crouching down, I tried to catch her eye. Then when it was clear that she was too scared to look up, I reached out to, I don't know, shake her out the shock she was in, but she flinched, clambered downward and pressed up against the wooden crate. The Indian started whimpering, wheezing as she struggled to catch her breath. Blood bubbled out the hole in the cheek, her eyes wide and wide, fixed on me. No, a place beyond me. A soft, uneasy padding sound came from behind me, warm and wet air blowing against the back of my arm. My heart started knocking about in my chest. I didn't intend to let them get this close. That's why Wyatt and I spent so much time down at the shooting range. Distance was your only friend against these schools. Walking move, Dutch, you stupid son of a bitch. A low guttural moan wells up behind, sending a shudder down my spine. I slipped my hand down to my holster and slowly drew out a gun. All the while, I watched the fear in the Indian's eyes. "Hi, Hattie," I said under my breath, cocked my gun. "Hi, Hattie," he echoed with a voice like dirt. "She can talk." I turned, raised my gun up and shot. Her head wasn't quite where I'd expected it to be, while my bullet kicked up some hay at the back of the barn. Hattie stood about a yard or 2 away, her back all crooked and snapped sideways. Her sheared spine jutted out of the top of her turned up hips like bison's tooth in an upturned grave. Her upper body had folded in on itself so that her head knocked against her left hip and both wrists scraped along the floor. That face, it once belonged to a child. It had once been the reason for Clinton Drew Sinclair to get out of bed every morning, but now she looked like leather held to the flame, all cracked and black with rot. Her mouth was gulping like a lamb-bound fish. Her eyes were dull and grey like tarnished steel. Hattie's lips slowly peeled up and away from her teeth and gums as she opened her jaws wide. The grey skin on of her face loosely bunched up beneath her eyes like fabric caught in a sewing machine. Then she let out a crackling howl and launched at me. Hattie's upturned torso swung wildly on a tangle of tendons and muscle tissue at her waist. Her arms swiped at my side, grabbing a fistful of shirt. She hooked a finger into my flank, digging deep into my chest and curling around one of my hips. I got a shot off and blew a hole in Hattie's arm. A wet lump of meat peeled back and flailed around like a muddied rag as we wrestled against one of the barrels. My shirt had started to become wet and red. That finger was still stubbornly clapped around my ball. I felt her other hand fumbling about my knee, trying to get a good handful of my pants. I took the gun and began hammering down on Hattie's hand, but the angle was awkward as I couldn't get much force behind my blows. My other hand was making wall swipes as she'd now gotten a hold of my leg. Another gnarled finger pressed into me. I screamed and tried to push her away, but Hattie was strong and relentless. The finger tore open my skin and wriggled its way into the soft tissue at the back of my knee. Hattie clumsily plucked at a tendon, sending a severe shudder through my leg and making it buckle. We both hit the floor and my gun trembled out of my hand. Hattie's guts spilled out of her hips all over me. A rectangle of rubbery ropes pressed against us, juices pooling out and soaking my shirt, getting into my face and mouth. The smell of rot hit me hard. I wanted to be sick, gagging and spluttering up phlegm. Shit, I cried. Another sharp fingernail tore at my flank and ripped a dirty hole in me. Then she pushed another squirming finger inside. Hattie's fingers dug deeper, coiling around the rubbery threads in my knees, and slowly pulled harder and harder. Then snap! My leg folded on its own accord. A pain laced through me like a cut from a rusty blade. Bile purged up my throat and rolled about in my mouth like a thick, fiery slug. I spat it out onto Hattie's dirt-matted hair in a pathetic act of defiance. I grabbed at the hand, attempting to excavate my chest, and desperately tried to pull it through. But with each tug, Hattie's grip around my rib grew tighter. Her hand was now sunk up to the knuckles. It was no use. I'd have to try another way, or else maybe if I was on my back, I could break away. I want my body, kicked off a nearby wooden crate with my good leg. Hattie resisted, tried to hold me down, but I kicked out again and managed to shift my weight enough to roll us over. Shit, Hattie hissed. Her mouth gargled with hatred. She snapped those tombstone teeth at my stomach. Yep, it down on nothing but air. I coughed out a laugh, already thinking myself a winner. Then she showed me how down my circumstances truly were and twisted her fingers around inside my chest. Then she pinched on something and pulled a half gasp trapped in my throat, and my body recoiled with the pain. Pink and blue lightning flashed at the edge of my vision. Glancing down at the wound in my chest, I noticed something odd. Between Hattie's fingers and thumb was a glistening crimson bulb that was now protruding from between my ribs. I looked like my chest had blown a huge bubble. She gave it another twist. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't fucking breathe. I swiped wildly at her hand and started prying her fingers away from the flesh she'd excavated from me. But her grip, it was too tight, and my fingers, they were so slippery with a rotten offal on my blood. Another victorious tug. My vision flashed right, and from it lurched up from my throat, burning like a stab from a cattle prod. My hands still fumbling, still failing me. I was going to pass out. I was going to die. Hattie will continue to rip me apart then nearly, and then who knows. Hattie pulled again on my lung, the organ slipping a little further out, though through that small gash on my side. A bloody lump exposed, the inside out. My body snapped forward. I vomited again, and all I could think about was train tracks, blackened steel girders, and wooden sleepers bisecting the desert and disappearing into the horizon. Iron John Keane, the railroad worker with a sunburnt scalp, oil-smeared cheeks, and a daily spot at the saloon spa. So why John? John had an accident whilst laying track a decade ago. He'd been steaming drunk, and after a long day in the sun, collapsed onto a box of rail spikes. He woke up with a hangover and 6 inches of steel hanging from the side of his head. Now fully healed and nowhere near sober, old John always enjoyed showing the boys his past trick, where he'd poke his entire tongue out the hole in his cheek. As I breathlessly thought with that bitch and watched her groan and gash and tug at me, I wondered if I'd still be alive when that railroad tongue eventually flopped out my chest. A noise, loud and hard, shaking the air around me. Hattie's face broke open and bloomed like a poisonous flower. Her skull shattered into sharp shards of white and oozed with a charcoal sludge. I felt Hattie's weight fall away. Her grip relented, and suddenly air filled my chest again. Another gunshot, then another. I was breathing, ragged and shallow, but breathing nonetheless. I tried to open my eyes, light swarmed in, flashing and blinding, a whirl of colours and shapes. I tried to get up and was firmly shoved to the floor. Pain vibrated through my entire body. Dutch, a voice said, "I don't think you should move yet." Wyatt? I peered up at the silhouette looming over me, the dark face sickly spinning, yet slowly coming into view, and just before the light hit Wyatt's panicked eyes, I could have sworn I'd seen another man stood in his place. A dead man, a lost man, the cook. What the fuck happened? Ain't it obvious? I coughed. Don't worry, Dutch, it's okay. Wyatt wasn't fooling anybody. His voice a couple of registers too high. We'll get you to Mary or Needles or anyone who could stitch you back up. I felt pressure on the wound in my chest. I coughed again, the taste was sick in my mouth. Not Mary, I said, my hand taking a fistful of Wyatt's shirt. She'll tell half the tale and we can't have anyone knowing what went down. Okay, Needles, Wyatt said. His presence still felt otherworldly. I'm sorry about this. A sharp pain in my side, a curled up tube or fuck, I screamed. I gasped and gasped for a breath that didn't come. My hand went searching for the blade he'd thrusted to my side and instead found a small gulping hole, and then suddenly I could breathe again. What did you do? I don't know, Dutch. That squeaky, nervous voice from when our daddy would bring out the belt just kind of pushed it back in. Pushed it back in? Yeah, he said. I don't think your lungs are supposed to be on the outside. I sucked in another deep breath. It hurt like a motherfucker, but at least I had air in me again. I walled onto my side, then tried to brave the blinding lights again. I opened my eyes. Dark lumps of flesh everywhere, wooden crates upturned and glistening with blood. The splintered hole of cool blue sky in the side of the barn. The warm afternoon sun lanced in, and motes of dust flashing gold on the air, and a body. The girl, not Hattie, the Indian, a bloodied bundle in the hay and dirt, legs and arms splayed out in all directions, such a shameful shape. Her face was now loose and emptied of the fear and pain from moments before. Smoke curled up from a nasty hole above her left eye. Those eyes heard her stare for miles and miles and miles, as if fixed on some unseen place beyond. What did you do? I coughed. Saved your dumb ass, Wyatt grunted back. He was tearing off strips of his shirt and pressing them against my blood-slick skin. Shot those goals that juncture. I grabbed at Wyatt's collar and brought him eye level, rage rising in me like a burning flame. There was only one I spat at the gunner's face. But I shook my head. Another Indian kid. Oh. Wyatt glanced over at the body, then his face creased into a deep frown. Yep, I said, nodding, then suddenly sapped of all my energy, all hope. I collapsed into his shoulder. My rage drained away and left me cold. It was futile. Anger wouldn't change anything. We already had the blood of one Indian on our hands. What was two? Can you walk? Don't know, and I'm scared to try. Wyatt's jaw was tight, nostrils flared. The face of that kid who was always too nervous to wade out beyond the reeds in the river, despite being ahead and shoulders above all the other kids in town. Wyatt nodded, then disappeared for a while. He searched the barn for some wood and rope. Then he did his best to piece together a makeshift brace for my bad leg. It was awkward and hurt like a motherfucker, but with Wyatt's help, it got me to my horse. I kept my eyes trained in the horizon whilst Wyatt bagged up the girls and prepared the barn to burn. No witnesses, no evidence, no crime. Only Reed now, on God if he was still knocking about. The sun was loitering pretty close to the distant mountains when Wyatt finally emerged from the barn, dragging two full Hessian sacks. You didn't need to peek inside to guess which one was Hattie's, all shapeless and wet. It reminded me of when Mama would return from the salt fork with a sopping bundle of laundry draped over her shoulder. Then, after slinging the girls over the back of each horse, Wyatt set sorry about that. Wyatt set that barn ablaze. We didn't wait long before setting off for the spot where it picked out for the boy and the cow. Just waited long enough to watch the shadows dance along the walls inside and smoke begin to plume out. We must have ridden about a quarter mile out, and then when I reined in my horse and I looked back at the flame. The sky was beginning to bruise, and the flame had completely swallowed the barn. Its amber tongues almost looked like they were licking at the pinkish underbellies of distant clouds. Almost content the sight, I was about to ride on, but something caught my eye. I missed a fiery blaze. I could see something dark moving within the yawned open shell of the barn. What's that? I said, nodding towards the flame. Wyatt followed my gaze and cocked his head. What do you see? I squinted, sorry. Tried to get a better look. A shape moving from the fire, as black as night. Smoke? Or maybe some wooden joists had started to fall. No, it looked like a man. A dark figure stepped out from the fire and then stopped. The flame still danced above the man's frame, but he appeared unprepared, motionless, silent. Why wasn't he thrashing around in pain, rolling in the dirt and screaming? Do you think that's why it didn't even have to utter his name? We both know, of course, it was that stubborn bastard. The start of all of our problems. The reason Magnum was a godless pitch of dirt. It was a crook. It was Walker. We stood turn round and take him out. Wyatt said, sliding up next to me. I shook my head, my eyes fixed on the man on fire. No, we got bodies to bury. But Dutch, he's on foot. We could finally get that sort of enough, I shouted, my words ringing out over the empty land. We have 3 bodies we need to deal with, and only 3 working legs. How do you suppose we also bring that bastard home too? But Dutch, but nothing, I said, turning my horse round and my back on the fire. The dead's going to be the last of our worries when some pissed off Indians could stay looking for their kids and find our crook's fingernails in one and your bullet in the other. Let's just do what we do and dig some deep fucking holes. Now take me to the dead boy. He wasn't far, and Wyatt had already made a hell of a start on the grave. The dirt looked good, barely any rocks, which for Magnum is like striking oil. We dug in silence until the moon was the only light we had. Wyatt showed most of the burden, but despite my leg, I was pleased with the amount of earth I'd been able to shift. Perhaps all was not lost. For a while we just stood there and stared out across the land. The distant mountains looked like the spine of a felled giant. Squint hard enough and you could see the double crosses, Wyatt said, finally breaking silence. I nodded. You don't need to see them to know they're close. Yep. Wyatt lit a cigarette and started to smoke. He offered me a drag, but I declined. You okay? I shook my head. Then, after letting the question roll around in my skull for a while, I asked, Have you ever heard them talk? Wyatt shot me a look, took a long drag, then spit it to the dirt. Nope. Hattie did. I found at the distant cluster of wooden stakes that strippled the ground. Their shadows were long and hatched. The sun starched grass. Does it matter? Wyatt said, flicking his smoke into the dirt. I don't know. We rolled back to town. Hattie's chewed up corpse slummed over the back of Wyatt's horse. Our backs against those 2 unmarked graves. Not a word shared between. Silence was our only honesty, our only safety. For a while now, Wyatt and I had tricked ourselves into thinking we were doing the town a favour. Heck, there was days when I'd joke and half believe we were doing God's work. How foolish we were. In truth, there's nothing complicated or special about what we do. In the end, all we do is dig holes. 4 people in them, then pray the ground accepts our offerings. Doing God's work. Christ. I knew it. Wyatt knew it. Everyone in Magnum had the thought rattling inside their head. Somewhere, how could we continue to have faith when the dirt just kept saying no? The morning light flashed crimson off the press tin. By the time we could see Magnum on the rise and the town looked like it was on fire. Perhaps it soon would be. It was the only thing remarkable, the dead yet heartful landscape. Everything else was just a sky and dirt. The dirt that had grown tired of us and started rejecting the dead. Our hearts now heavy with the depths we hold. Our minds rattled by the dreams of a ravaged world and a heaven closed to all creatures who scuttled beneath that silent Magnum sun. After seeing Walker burned against twilight sky, I'm certain that there's a hell, though it may not be a place we go, but rather something we become. And that was the end of that creepypasta. So I did enjoy that one. It wasn't quite what I was imagining, to be fair, but I did enjoy it, to be fair. I don't quite know what exactly I was expecting. I was just imagining basically cowboy zombies, but this one was quite an interesting one. It's more set in the Wild West, and it's quite interesting having the zombies, especially ones that talk as well, because you don't have many zombies that talk apart from Bruins. So yeah, it was quite a different one. but I enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. And if you have any suggestions for future creepypastas you'd like me to cover, or just anything else in general that you'd like me to cover on this channel, then just let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next one.